Um, Time for another video. This one is what I read in July of 2023. I read quite a few. It was quite a good month for reading. So I'll start off. First one I read was Take It Back by Kia Abdullah. This was the July book out of the book club that my daughters bought me, where they bought me a whole year of books wrapped up and one each month. This was the July book. And it was essentially the victim, a 16-year-old girl with facial deformities, neglected by an alcoholic mother who accuses the boys of something unthinkable. The defendants, four handsome teenage boys from hard-working immigrant families, all with corroborating stories. Which side do you take? So it was a courtroom drama all about, it was a Muslim lawyer who was taking the side of a white girl against four Muslim boys from prominent families. And it looked at the impact it had on her and her family relationships, the boys and the girl, and there was quite a twist at the end, so I'm not going to say any more. But yeah, I actually thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was not the sort of thing I read very often, but it was gripping and a little bit more than just criminal's bad, victim, poor little victim kind of line, wonderful brave lawyer. There was a bit more to it than that, so yeah, I really enjoyed that. The next one was graphic novel Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire. I read this because I absolutely love the Netflix, I'm sure it's Netflix, adaptation of Sweet Tooth. Completely different. The basic gist of the story is the same, but as a very, very different tone. Sweet Tooth on the television is something that a child could watch. This is very much more grim and dark. It's a graphic novel, but it is a very big graphic novel. I'm not sure how many pages there are in it, but there are a lot. It is a very thick, quite heavy going for a graphic novel. But yes, I did enjoy it. It was a very different take on the story, but still very interesting. Essentially, it's a post-apocalyptic book that there was a virus that killed the majority of the population, but the virus also caused children to be born with deformities, but these deformities were more aspects of certain animals. So as you can see, Sweet Tooth himself, Gus, has the antlers and the ears of a deer, and all the children have different aspects of different animals. So quite an interesting concept, and yes, that I thoroughly enjoyed that, as I thoroughly enjoyed the TV show. The next one was Metronome by Tom Watson. This was the book from the End of the World Reading Club. For 12 years, Aina and Whitney have been in exile on an island for a crime they committed together, tethered to a croft by pills they take for survival every 8 hours. They're kept busy, Aina with her garden, her jigsaw, her music, Whitney with his sculptures and maps, but something is not right. And this is essentially some people set in a dystopian future where some people who break the law, I think from what I remember it was about having children when they shouldn't have children, are put on prison, but it's instead of a prison, it's a deserted island where they have to live for a certain period of time and make things work for themselves. There was some interesting aspects here about how they had, people from a normal life had managed to make a life for themselves on this island. It was a bit claustrophobic at times, and again, a bit of a twist at the end. Quite enjoyed it. Not my favourite. I'd only recommend it if you're like me and are particularly obsessed with this kind of book. To be honest, it wasn't something that really stood out that much in my mind. The next one was The Owl Service by Alan Garner. I won this and another book, can't remember the title off the top of my head, in a raffle at the Feast of Fools storytellers group that I go to. I read this. I also, after reading this, watched the TV adaptation. That was from the 70s, sometime around the 70s. I quite enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed the film adaptation. Quite a dated story, really. Obviously, it was before the internet, before mobile phones, before all that kind of thing. And it reads very differently because of that. It's a very different, basically, the flowery owl patterns on the old dinner service, which Gwyn finds in a loft, obsesses Alison. Its discovery marks the start of an extraordinary chain of events that affect not only Gwyn and Alison, but also her stepbrother Roger, for there's a power stirring in the remote valley that dates from a sad and distant myth. Yeah, it's kind of like linking to, I remember now, yeah, it was linking it back to an old Welsh myth about the area, and the owl service relates to a dinner service with pictures of owls that they find that kind of triggers this myth to come back to life. There were some interesting parts to it, and it was a book I was glad I read. Not one I'd hugely recommend, though. It is a bit dry. I found a bit hard to plough through. The other book I read was Happy Head. This was another one that came from the End of the World Reading Club. We're in an epidemic of happiness. Friends, here's the good news. Happy Head has the answer. When Seb is selected for an innovative retreat designed to tackle teenage unhappiness, it's his chance to finally be good at something. Getting close to the troubled Finn is definitely not part of the plan. But the challenges the participants must undergo become more unsettling by the day, and together the boys start to question the true nature of the experiment. Yeah, group of kids put together, have to do things, a bit like Hunger Games, like it says on the front. I didn't really like it very much, to be honest. I found the characters in it weren't very engaging. It was all very predictable, teenage angsty stuff, and it was okay, but no, it wasn't really for me. I certainly wouldn't read anything else by him, I have to say, at this level. Not my favourite book by quite a long way. I also read 2 books on the Kindle this month. The first one I read was, I've got it here, The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is a classic, obviously. Complex story of a wealthy family back in the day, and there's a woman in white, and they're obviously all interrelated to each other, and people are trying to get to the bottom of it. False accusation of murder and all sorts of things go on. Complicated story. It was good. I did enjoy it. I felt it went on a bit at the end. I felt it could have ended about 3 chapters earlier. It had come to a conclusion, and it was just dragging it out. But yeah, it was a classic. There's always a reason why classics are classics, because they are interesting all the way through. Slightly turgid writing style at times. There was a bit too much description, but yeah, it was a good book, and it is one I would recommend to people who do like reading classics. The other one I read, which I can't find a cover for, I'll see if I can get one to put up, was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, another classic. I read it years ago and absolutely loved it, and then I read it about 20 years ago and absolutely loved it. I read it this time, didn't have the same effect on me as before, I think possibly because I know the storyline, I know what happens, I've seen both film adaptations of it. It didn't hold that element of surprise anymore, but it's still beautifully written and very evocative of that time and that era, as all of Fitzgerald's books are. I do like F. Scott Fitzgerald. I've read everything that he's published at some point. And yeah, a great book, and one of those books that everybody should read. So that was the list for July. Quite long. I was quite impressed with how much I read, particularly as A Woman in White was a long book and took me a long time to read it. So yeah, hopefully that's okay, and I will be back soon with what I read in August.